A 22-year-old woman was on her way home after spending the evening at a party with her friends. She was only a few steps away from safety. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching her from the very beginning, waiting for the moment that would change her life forever. Before we dive into today's story, please send blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. On the morning of August 31st, 2003, in a deserted area near an old landfill, a horrifying scene awaited two people who were walking through the area. As they made their way along the path, they were shocked to discover the body of a young woman. From the very first glance, it was clear that she had passed away. The police were immediately called to the scene, and when investigators arrived and examined the body, they quickly realized that this was far from a natural death. The young woman was lying face down, partially unclothed. She was wearing only a shirt on the upper part of her body, while her lower body was exposed. Her legs were slightly spread apart, suggesting from the outset that she had endured something horrific. At that point, the worst possibility began to emerge. Police immediately suspected that she had been sexually assaulted. She was not wearing her shoes, and scratches and injuries covered her body, particularly on her hands and arms. As with every crime, there is always a story behind it, so let's go back to the beginning to learn who the victim was and what happened to her. The victim was Catherine J. Sipich, known as Katie. She was 22 years old at the time. She was born on December 27, 1980, to her parents Dave and Janine. She also had a sister named Caroline and a brother named AJ. The family lived in Carlsbad, and Katie was pursuing graduate studies in business administration at New Mexico State University. Her life was going exceptionally well. She excelled academically and maintained strong relationships with those around her. Katie did not live with her family. Instead, she shared an apartment with her friend Tracy on the east side of Las Cruces, near the university. In short, she had moved from her hometown of Carlsbad to Las Cruces to continue her education. At that time, Katie was in a relationship with a young man named Joe. They had met during their undergraduate years, and Joe was studying biochemistry. Their relationship had lasted for about 8 months, and Katie was deeply in love with him, seeing him as her ideal life partner. Joe felt exactly the same way about her. He had given her a ring. It was not an engagement ring, but rather a symbolic gift between them, and that ring would later play an important role in the story.
While Katie continued her studies, Joe returned to his hometown to work with his family. Since his town was far from Las Cruces, their relationship became long distance. The situation frustrated both of them, but they tried to meet whenever possible. At the end of August 2003, they made plans to see each other again. Since it coincided with the Labor Day holiday weekend, Joe decided to visit Las Cruces and spend several days with Katie. On August 30, 2003, after finishing her shift at work, she worked part-time as a waitress at a Mexican restaurant while attending university. Katie returned home and prepared to go out with Joe and her friend Tracy. The three of them headed to a party held at a house in a nearby neighborhood known as Herring, a little over 1 kilometer from where they lived, roughly a 15-minute walk away. And that was where the night that changed everything began. It was a completely ordinary gathering, much like many college parties across the United States. Around 30 people attended, spending the night talking, laughing, and drinking. By the end of the evening, many guests did not return home. Instead, they stayed overnight at the party because most of them were in no condition to drive or even move around normally. The next morning, Tracy woke up and immediately began looking for Katie. She also noticed that Joe was still there. At first, nothing seemed unusual, and she assumed Katie might have left early and gone home. But soon she discovered something that caused serious concern. Katie's purse was still inside the house. Her cell phone and apartment keys were there as well. Tracy paused and thought to herself, how could Katie have gone home when all of her essential belongings were still here? The situation became even stranger because Joe was still present. If Katie had left with him, it would have made sense, but he had never left either. At that point, both Tracy and Joe became genuinely worried. They started calling Katie's friends, asking whether she had gone to their homes or spent the night there, but no one knew where she was. Tracy then returned to their apartment to see if Katie had somehow made it back, but there was no sign of her. The search quickly expanded. They contacted local hospitals in case she had been involved in an accident or suffered a medical emergency, but every attempt led nowhere. They also reached out to her mother, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. Perhaps the most unsettling part was her mother's reaction. The moment she heard the news, she felt that something terrible had happened to her daughter. There was no evidence or specific reason for this feeling, it was simply a mother's intuition. After exhausting every possibility, Tracy and Joe went to the police and officially reported Katie missing. Thus began the investigation into the disappearance of 22-year-old Katie Sepich, who had last been seen at a party attended by a group of students and young adults. It did not take long for investigators to uncover their first lead in the case, but it was the worst lead imaginable.
Later that same day, August 31st, only a few hours after she was reported missing, Katie's body was discovered near the old landfill. The condition of her body and the evidence found on it strongly indicated that she had been sexually assaulted. The scratches and wounds covering her body clearly showed that she had fought with everything she had, but her attacker ultimately overpowered her. From the beginning, investigators suspected that the cause of death was strangulation due to the marks visible on her neck. After the body was transported to the medical examiner's office and an autopsy was performed, that theory was officially confirmed. Katie had died as a result of strangulation, and the autopsy also confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted before her murder. It was a horrific crime in every sense of the word. Investigators also noticed something important at the location where the body was found. There were no signs of a struggle or resistance at the scene, leading them to believe that the crime had occurred elsewhere and that the killer had later transported and dumped the body there. But the brutality did not end there. After assaulting and strangling her, the killer attempted to conceal the crime in an even more disturbing manner. He poured a flammable substance over her body and set it on fire. Investigators found burn marks on her hands and back, confirming that the offender had tried to destroy evidence and hide the details of his crime.
Unfortunately for the killer, the fire did not last long and quickly burned out. It appears that as soon as he ignited it and saw the flames spreading, he fled the scene, believing the body would be completely consumed by the fire, unaware that it would extinguish shortly afterward. His objective was clear. He wanted the body to be entirely burned, so that all possible evidence would be destroyed, whether biological traces, DNA samples, or anything else that could eventually lead investigators to him. At the crime scene, police noted something extremely important. They found fresh tire tracks on the ground. Investigators collected samples and measurements of those tracks in hopes of determining the type of vehicle that had left them, and whether the information might prove useful later in the investigation. At that point, the victim's identity had not yet been officially confirmed. However, police strongly suspected that the body belonged to Katie, especially since she had been reported missing only hours earlier, and the physical characteristics matched her description closely. To confirm the identity, investigators contacted Katie's family and called her father, Dave, asking him to come and identify the body. The father immediately traveled from his hometown to the city where the crime had occurred. When he arrived and was escorted into the identification room, he experienced the worst nightmare of his life. The moment he saw the body, he was overwhelmed with shock and struggled to breathe. His reaction alone told everyone present that it was indeed his daughter. After managing to regain some composure, he officially confirmed that the body belonged to Katie. He later described that moment as the most painful experience of his life, as if his soul were being torn from his body. He even wished that he had been the one in her place, or that he could die and be with her. With the victim officially identified, the police now had only one objective: find the killer as quickly as possible. Anyone capable of committing such a brutal crime could strike again. News of the murder quickly spread throughout the community, creating widespread fear and panic, especially among women. Many found themselves asking the same terrifying question: could I be next? The killer was still free, and no one knew who he was or where he might be. As a result, investigators began one of the most important stages of the case, reconstructing Katie's final movements on the night of August 30th, 2003, when she attended the party with her friend Tracy and her boyfriend Joe. Detectives started by interviewing the last people known to have seen her alive, beginning with Joe and Tracy, the same two people who had reported her missing. Joe stated that several hours into the party, he suddenly realized Katie was gone. He searched for her inside the house but could not find her. At the time, he said he didn't think much of it, and assumed she had become tired and gone home to sleep. However, when no one had seen or heard from her by the following day, genuine concern began to set in. At that point, investigators developed an initial theory that Katie may have been attacked or abducted while walking home, especially since her apartment was located very close to the party. Detectives retraced the route she was believed to have taken, searching for signs of a struggle, bloodstains, or any other evidence that might help explain what happened. They also knocked on every door along the route between the party house and her apartment, a walk that typically took around 15 minutes. Residents were asked whether they had seen or heard anything unusual that night, but no useful information emerged. The first significant piece of evidence appeared when investigators reached Katie's apartment.
Inside, everything seemed normal. There were no signs of a struggle, forced entry, or any crime. But outside the apartment, directly beneath her bedroom window, detectives discovered something unusual. The window screen had been removed and was lying on the ground, while the window itself remained closed. At first, the discovery was confusing, but when investigators remembered that Katie had left her keys, phone, and purse at the party, the situation began to make sense. They theorized that she had returned home and realized she had no keys to unlock the door. Without her phone, she had no way to call anyone for help. As a result, they believed she attempted to remove the screen and enter her room through the window, rather than walk all the way back to the party. And that was where the most disturbing possibility emerged. Perhaps the killer had been watching her at that very moment. When he saw her distracted and vulnerable while trying to get inside, he seized the opportunity and attacked. Police soon found evidence supporting this theory. Katie's shoes were discovered outside the apartment, but they were not lying together. Instead, they were separated from each other, suggesting that some kind of struggle had taken place. Investigators also found marks in the gravel, indicating that a body may have been dragged across the ground or had fallen there during a confrontation. Based on the evidence, detectives reached a chilling conclusion. Katie had successfully made it home. She had been standing near her bedroom window, attempting to get inside, when she was attacked. After killing her, the offender transported her body to the remote area near the landfill and attempted to burn it in order to destroy evidence and conceal the crime. But one question continued to haunt everyone involved in the case. Who was the killer? Was he a complete stranger who happened to cross paths with her and followed her home, or was he someone she knew well? Investigators began focusing on all the men who had attended the party. Since the crime involved sexual assault, every male attendee became a potential suspect. Statements were collected, biological samples were taken, and every detail was carefully examined. Then, during the investigation, new information surfaced that changed the entire direction of the case. Several partygoers revealed that Katie had not left the party simply because she was tired. She had left because she was extremely upset. The reason? She had seen her boyfriend Joe kissing another woman. An argument broke out between them, and after a heated confrontation, Katie left the party alone at around 3 o'clock in the morning. What made the situation suspicious was that Joe had never mentioned any of this during his first interview with police. He completely concealed the fact that they had argued shortly before her disappearance. This immediately raised a critical question. Was he hiding nothing more than an embarrassing relationship dispute, or was he hiding something far more serious? And it wasn't just the police he kept this information from. Joe also concealed the truth from Katie's family. When they asked why she had left the party alone, he claimed he did not know. The reality was that she had left after catching him cheating on her right in front of her. Even more troubling, he never attempted to follow her or make sure she got home safely after she left. Naturally, Joe quickly became the primary suspect in the investigation. When detectives questioned him again and increased the pressure, he admitted that the argument had indeed taken place. He then revealed another strange detail. According to Joe, after Katie left the party, he got into his car and drove to her apartment to make sure she had arrived safely. The problem was that he claimed he only drove past the apartment briefly before leaving. He never knocked on the door, checked whether she was inside, or tried to speak with her. This only deepened investigators' suspicions. If he was truly worried about her, why would he leave without confirming anything? Even stranger, on the following morning he repeatedly called Katie's phone, despite knowing that her phone had been left behind at the party. Detectives began wondering whether he was merely pretending to be concerned and attempting to create a story that would support his innocence. Because of these contradictions, Joe became the investigation's main suspect. Police started constructing a new theory. Patty left the party angry. Joe followed her to her apartment. The argument resumed near the window she was trying to enter through, and the confrontation eventually escalated into murder. But there was only one thing capable of revealing the truth once and for all: DNA. And when investigators began analyzing the biological evidence that had been collected,